Amber Romaniuk. Wow, is this one a pleasure to have you on the Calgary Fitness Podcast? Because you and I go way back. Like I'm talking almost 15 years ago. We met as young kids in broadcasting school.
We did. It's hard to believe. It doesn't even feel real now.
And a lot has happened then since then, but you and I have actually stayed relatively, in contact throughout the entire thing. And
Yeah.
I think that's awesome because it just talks about the connections that we built back in school. And I'm so proud of you from where you've come now, or from where we were to where we are now. Like it's so great to see
Thanks.
your journey. And obviously I'm seeing a lot of it from afar, but I'd love to, just talk a little bit about what you're doing now and who you help.
Yeah, so I know likewise, it's incredible that it's been 15 years and here we are in a completely different place. So yeah, I've had my business now for 7 years. I'm an emotional eating, digestive, and hormone expert, and I really specialize in those items. So I really largely support women all over the world who are struggling with their relationship with food. They've been heavily conditioned and almost what I feel like is brainwashed with like diet conditioning, being obsessed with the scale, being critical of body image. And so as a consequence, what ends up happening is, these women, just like me, I was in the same boat, were convinced that looking a certain way would resolve all issues and would make life perfect. But the problem is with all of that, that I find when I went through my experience and then with my clients is that you really get into such negative self-talk and body obsession, and then you do extreme diets and you're doing extreme exercise, and then you can't attain either of those. So then you're going and overeating and binging all the foods that you're not allowing yourself to have. And as a consequence, it really can have a significant negative impact on your hormones, your digestion, your cravings and blood sugar. And, then people gain weight and then get frustrated because they can't get it off. And so this is kind of this whole evolution of struggles that I see my clients, experiencing and what I went through. And what, to me, one of the biggest things that's really opened my eyes over the last few months is how conditioned society has been by, movies and magazines and like photoshopping that there's this perfect mold to fit for both men and women, right? It's a very similar, the six pack of abs for the guy and the muscles, and the girl has to have the flat stomach, blah, blah, blah. And when we've been taught essentially that like if you look this way, you can have anything you want, it really is hard to think that anything else could be acceptable. So then here go all the diets and everything. So that's really for me what I focus on with my clients. And then, of course, outside of that, I do also record a podcast where I go so into depth about everything that I am talking about here, because it's just so important for people to know they're not alone, and to hear my experiences. And of course, without getting into confidentiality here, like the kind of commonalities that clients are struggling with and overcoming, because storytelling is so important and being vulnerable is so important, because it really allows other people to know they're not alone and there's nothing wrong with you if you are struggling with anything to do with any of these things, or your mindset, or you feel like you're negative and you can't get out of it. So that for me, has been such a gift to have first really struggled deeply with food addiction in my early 20s and then overcome that on my own, and then be inspired to go, I want to help people do the same thing. So that's what's really brought me to where I am now. I can't believe it's been 7 years that I've been in business, but it's just been incredible. And there's always so many women reaching out to want to get this support. So it just lets me know how important and needed this service is.
Well, I want to talk about that. Like, let's rewind 7 years. Where were you? Who were you? And why was it important for you to say, I need to help people?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it really was, struggling with my own body image issues and struggling with food addiction and struggling with emotional eating and, diets, and thinking that it was all about eating less and exercising more, which is largely what is preached, which is so archaic and so couldn't be further from the truth of what people really need, as you know, as well. And so after I overcame everything on my own, I thought, how many other people, especially women, are struggling with this exact same thing, whether less intensive than me, the same as me, more intensive than me, and don't necessarily know where to go, who to reach out to, that there is, help available, someone they can feel comfortable with. And there's a stat a couple different stats that I had read that were, talking about how 90% of the female population is or has struggled with some form of, emotional relationship with food and body image struggles, dysmorphia, etc. And that is too significant of a stat. And it just really, to me, affirms that conditioning and how unfortunately strong that conditioning has been through all of these things that should have disclaimers if they've been altered, photoshopped, etc. And I just think that, to me, I was like, okay, well, I've overcome this. I have the brain of an addict. I know what these women are going through. I know what it feels like to be the heaviest of your life and be the thinnest and still not be happy, and like to overcome the digestive issues and the hormone imbalances. And when I started to share my story and had other women then start to open up and share that they were struggling or had struggled with the exact same things, it blew my mind, because I think one of the biggest things that inspired me to want to help people is you see someone and you'd assume that they are never going through anything because they're, they don't look like they are. But when people start opening up of all shapes and sizes, experiences, that they're experiencing the same thing, it's just like, wow, there is such a silence around this, and there should not be. There's so much shame around weight. But unfortunately, it's almost like emotional eating has been normalized. Like when people brag about how much they've eaten, or there's encouragement by food ads to go and eat, a whole pint of ice cream or eat the whole pizza. And it's like, that's not healthy for anybody, but it's being encouraged by these companies, right? So it was all of these things that really drove me to want to specialize in this area, because I bring a lot of unique traits to the table, and a lot of my clients share that with me, of that they've never experienced this kind of support before on these levels. So I think, though, it took me going through it myself to just have the mindset and the understanding so that I could really relate to people and also know what's going on for them. So that's really was the driving force for me, is those different items and just getting the clarity of that's really what I wanted to focus on.
And I think it's important to highlight that, like, to hire a coach, it's nice to know that they went through that themselves and that they struggled through it to really get that key to unlock. And the thing is your experience will not be the same as anybody else's, but at least you've had similar experiences that you can say, hey, like, I am in your corner, and I can understand how hard this is, and just know that you're not alone. I think that was one of the biggest things that you said right there, was just knowing that you're not alone. So let's talk about the relationship with food itself. And, you mentioned that there is emotional eating. And, I spoke with someone who was in the similar field, and they said, from the moment you're born, that connection you have with your mother to breastfeeding, like, eating is an emotional thing, right? And we have been conditioned by the media to kind of, overeat. And, this is just an aside here, but like, sometimes I'll be listening to like the morning radio DJs, and it's like, I did this and I did that. So it's just like, I'd love to hear your take on, how do you know if there is some emotional eating? How do you know that? How do you recognize that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So emotional eating is any reason for eating other than for physical nourishment. And while we have a very emotional connection to the mothers, once we're born and we're being raised, we also have to remember that from age 0 to 7, our subconscious minds are fully open and taking in everything around us, from what we're seeing, from our parents' behavior. So if either of your parents has an emotional relationship with food, or a lot of what's very common is parents being critical of their kids and what they're eating and putting them on diets at a young age. And so that can fuel really unhealthy behaviors with body image and food, even from the people who you're spending the most time around as you're growing up, or whatever you're seeing on TV, etc. But, people, there's different aspects of emotional eating and kind of different levels of behavior that can come along with it. So there's kind of a spectrum. So when I say emotional eating is any reason for eating other than physical nourishment, what I mean by that is when you're physically hungry and you sit down and eat, ideally when you're eating mindfully and you're not watching TV and on your phone and you're focusing on mindful eating, that's really physical nourishment. You eat to support your energy levels, your overall health, and to provide yourself with the nutrients that you need to be healthy. My window, I think there's noise coming. Do you mind if I just close it? I forgot.
Not at all. Not at all. While we're here, I will just throw in the plugs for you. If you want more information on what Amber's up to, you can always head to her website, amberapproved.ca. Is that right?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
So if you need more information, that's just a little bit of a mid-roll that we want to put in the, the podcast here. But
I just didn't want you to hear all the neighbors outside playing and screaming and stuff. So,
all good.
yeah. So, and it's not talked about in school. No one learns about emotional eating or any, right? So it's just so ignored. So the starting spectrum of emotional eating that I find most people are struggling with is they will have a bad day, or they're stressed, or they're tired, or maybe they didn't prepare a good dinner. And so they just get into this, I'm tired, I don't care. And they just eat whatever the first thing is that they can find. Or they're stressed and they eat the chocolate bar, or they're stressed or they eat, the half a bag of chips. And then the guilt kicks in, or the frustration of, oh, I shouldn't have done that. They beat themselves up. And then there is this need to restrict in some way, or go on a diet, or go, okay, yeah, tomorrow I'm going to get back to clean eating. But there's a lot of shame and negative association with what they've just done. And then the habit, though, keeps repeating, and it becomes a coping mechanism. So whether it's a half a chocolate bar or 5 chocolate bars that you eat at the same time, you are using food now as a coping mechanism, as a crutch, as a quick fix to distract, avoid, or numb feeling emotions, or actually, avoid addressing what is going on in your world, either externally or internally, that you are not happy with, that's out of your control, or that you're feeling insecure with. So then we get into, emotional eating, which is more of a phase of binge eating, which is you are triggered in some way. So maybe it's like overwhelmed. That's a very common trigger that my clients have. So maybe you're overwhelmed and you're have this fight going back and forth in your head, which is like, maybe I'll just use the ice cream as an example. I'm going to have some ice cream. No, don't have the ice cream, but I'm really craving it. Oh no, don't have it. If you have it, you won't be able to stop. And so you start having some, or maybe you're at a barbecue and there's like brownies and you're like, oh, I'm only going to have one, but you have one. The guilt and shame kicks in, and that triggers the all or nothing mentality, which is really like, well, screw it. I've already messed up my day. So now I'm just going to like go all out and eat whatever I want. And you end up eating to the point where there's a loss of control, to the point where you feel so full and so bloated that it's uncomfortable. And now there's pain, and now there's this like bigger aspect of physical suffering, as well as then the guilt and all those things that I talked about, right? So that's, to me, more the binge eating, where it's like you're eating in this full loss of control until you are so full you just feel sick. And so that's really where we go from just some emotional eating to binging, and then where the food addiction really comes in, which is, to me, kind of the most all-consuming aspect, is really you're thinking about food all the time, you're obsessing about food all the time, you have heavy cravings, whether it's like salt, sugar, carbs, breads, cheeses, fast food, whatever your thing is. And it's like you rarely get a break from food, whether you're thinking about what you're going to binge on or go and buy at the store later, or, oh, my lunch, I have to make sure that like this is what I'm eating for lunch, and like I have to stick to it. There's like a deep need to have such a intensive control around food for fear of losing control with it, even though you're completely out of control. But that fear, what's below that fear, is this insecurity and not feeling good enough in your body. And so you're thinking externally, like, if I can just lose the weight on this diet and look a certain way, I'll finally be happy. But it's this complete loss of control, and it's complete mindlessness, and the cravings and all the negative self-talk just fuel this obsession with food, where it's like, I was to the point where I would be at a social setting and I would make up a lie or excuse to leave so I could go to the store and buy my binge food, come home, put on a movie, numb out, and just eat it all, because the cravings would get so intensive. And my ego, which I call the self-sabotaging mindset, would just completely take over and go like, you need to go and eat now. Like, and it was just this strong force that took over me. And so that food addiction is really, you're eating uncontrollably, anytime your trigger foods are around you. And for some people that could be sugar, some people that could be, more baked goods, chips, whatever it is. But anytime you're around your trigger foods, you lose control. It's very hard to stop. It's like multiple days or weeks of just like binging, even though you don't want to do it. So that's kind of how I dissect like the different kind of realms of the emotional relationship with food. For some people it's very minimal, but it still has an impact, and it's still an unhealthy behavior with food. And then for some it is all consuming. It does really consume every part of your life. And that's really what happened for me. I isolated because I gained a bunch of weight, and I just revolved my life around food and my crappy retail job, and was really unhappy, broke, alone, because I had created that with my own insecurities and this deep belief conditioning of, oh, but if you could only look this certain way, then everything would be perfect, right? So that's really the explanation that I experienced, and that, I see my clients experiencing on some level of that. I know some, people struggle with binging and purging. I went through that for a period of 6 months, luckily was able to stop it. I know there's, different levels, but regardless of where you are, if you are struggling with this on any level, the key is to have compassion for yourself, because it's not your fault. Um, and I think to just start to understand, if you are dealing with it, that there are different steps you can take in different ways you can start to slowly address it, that it's not a one size fits all, and a quick fix or fast trying to change it quickly is not going to get you where you want to go.
Well, thank you so much for being so vulnerable. I think that that's, key to recognizing that this is, this is within. This is, like you said, it's not your fault. This is definitely something that's within. So how do you begin to really address that? Like, if somebody's listening or watching this right now and they're thinking, maybe there is something there with food that I'm finding, that needs to be addressed. I guess, what are the first steps to recognize that within yourself?
Yeah. So I think there's some different questions and reflection that are really important to start doing to build awareness, because it's really difficult to know anything if you're not aware. So that's really the first step. So some things that you can do to help you develop awareness or see if you have an emotional relationship with food are things like, before you go and eat. So say all of a sudden you have this urge or this craving, it's to ask yourself, am I physically hungry? Do I need to physically fulfill my hunger, or is this emotional? And so some signs of physical hunger cues. Number one, you look at the clock and notice you haven't eaten in 3 hours. Yes, then likely you probably do need to fuel your body. Maybe your stomach is growling. Maybe you're getting a hunger signal. As an aside, a lot of my clients don't get a hunger signal, and that's because of all the damage to the metabolism and the thyroid from all the restriction, fasting, waiting too long to eat breakfast, skipping breakfast, etc. So if you're like, I don't know what it feels like to feel hungry, there's largely probably hormone imbalances and metabolism issues going on there that are in the way of you producing the ghrelin, which makes you hungry. So just know it's okay if you're there. We can wake that signal back up by starting to address this and work on the relationship with food and the body. But I can't stress that enough, because a lot of people don't ever feel hungry. So if you don't get the hunger signal, you can go to the cue of the stomach growling, check the clock, or maybe you're all of a sudden, you notice that your energy just drops and you get lightheaded and dizzy and you get the hangry feeling. That is like severe blood sugar dropping, which is often a sign, again, that we've waited too long to eat. So those are some physical cues. And then, if you're like, you know what, I just ate, I know I'm, not physically hungry, that this is emotional, then pull out a piece of paper or a journal, or just sit down, remove yourself from the kitchen or wherever the food is, get out of the vulnerable area, and ask yourself, what may this be about? Have I had a stressful day? Did I not have enough sleep? Have I not had enough water today? Have I actually just been eating, sugar, empty calorie foods all day? And therefore my hunger is not fulfilled because I'm not fueling my body properly? Did I have a fight with somebody? Am I stressed about something? Do I associate, doing my work on my laptop or watching TV with eating? And so it's just like all of a sudden I go into this habit and I just want to eat. There's many different potential triggers that could be going on for the person, but even just starting to ask those kinds of questions is very powerful, because when you can start to tell the difference between physical and emotional hunger, you can really start to identify, I don't actually need to eat. This is emotional. This is potentially what's going on. So how can I maybe take the steps to address what's actually going on? Can be easier said than done when it's really intensive and you have this strong urge all the time to go and eat, or your cravings are really intense. But that's a great place to start. Another thing that's really important, this is kind of twofold. One's to do with social media and one's to do with your schedule. So I find for people who are overbooked, which is a lot of people, the overbooked schedule can lead to a lot of overwhelm, and that's a huge emotional eating trigger. If we're not willing to dedicate time to take care of ourselves, to get enough sleep, to nourish our body, and really give ourselves our basic needs, let alone then take some time to do some form of self-care, to relax and get grounded and unwind and find some form of inner peace, it's very difficult to really feel just in this kind of state of calm. Like if you're overbooked and you have a bazillion things on your plate, how is it possible to just sit and have inner peace and go, I'm good. I know that, I don't need to use food to cope. Like I rarely would ever see that. So we have to address the schedule, because what's hiding behind the overbooked schedule is usually mentalities like people pleasing, overachieving, perfectionism, which what is below that? Not feeling good enough. So I'm going to try and prove externally through all of the things that I'm doing, and maybe people will see it, and then maybe I can get validation from them that I'm good enough. Since I don't know how to validate myself, I'm going to put my value and worth in other people's hands. And so here you are giving everything you have to everybody else for fear of, I can't say no, because if I did, I can't afford to upset anyone. I don't want conflict, and I don't want to let anyone down, because then that would make me upset. So that's a very unhealthy dynamic to have, that people pleasing, overachieving, perfectionist mentality, because you drain yourself, you overbook your schedule. But really what that overbooked schedule is about, it's a distraction from you really truly doing your inner work. And it's an avoidance distraction kind of mechanism, because what a lot of people have been sharing with me is, wow, I didn't realize that I was purposefully overbooking my schedule to make others happy, to try and fulfill my own happiness. And what I was avoiding was the insecurities that I've been dealing with, the opportunity to get uncomfortable. It's too scary. So that's a huge dynamic that is pretty much going on for everybody that I talk to. It used to be me too. I used to be a massive people pleaser, and I used to be very insecure and put my validation in other people and need reassurance from others. However, once you start to bring balance to your schedule, doesn't mean you shut down your whole life and you only stay home and take care of yourself, but it's about having some form of balance, and everyone needs to find what that is for them, where you make yourself a priority, because your body is not a robot. Your body needs you to dedicate time to take care of it, right? It's just proof with the health of the world in North America. Like people are, this hustle mentality, it causes adrenal fatigue. It's not good for our health. It's such a horrible mentality. And I think it just needs to go. It's a bad fad because it's making people sick. So the calendar is a big part, and then the social media or technology is a big part, because people go, I don't have time to do self-care. But then here people are scrolling on Instagram or on their phones for 3 hours or an hour or half an hour. And I'm like, well, why don't you take that time and get, off your phone and go and do some form of self-care, get out for a walk, do meditation, journal, go and do some mindful movement, take some time of that time to dedicate to some food prep and have healthy food prepared to set you up for success. Explore this emotional hunger, right? Get to bed earlier, because one of the biggest, negative rabbit holes that happens when we go on social media, if we're insecure, is you start looking at other profiles where the bodies have been photoshopped, the diet, comparing, and then is it 65 or 70% of people feel worse after getting off of social media for their mental health? That's significant, and that's a huge trigger for people struggling with emotional eating, is going on social media, starting to compare, and then they shut down and either want to go buy the extreme diet or they want to go eat because they're so unhappy, or they just feel so worthless because they don't have that perfect body, even though there's no disclaimer on that photo going, this has likely been altered in some way to sell something, right? So those are, I know that's a long explanation, but what I'm hoping people get out of this is it's not just a one size fits all. There are many complex layers to this journey of emotional eating, mindset, your mind-body connection, your self-worth. And that's why it's so important to take the time to start to dedicate to unravel this, because the food and body freedom comes from being willing to be done with the quick fixes, to unlearn them, and to go inside and take the time that you need to take for your unique journey.
Wow. Thank you so much. Even though it was long, I was clinging to every single word that you said there. And I think, you were vulnerable. I need to be a little bit vulnerable too, because when I first started my fitness business, it was about getting stronger, seeing the muscles, improving. But for me, what really opened up and was unlocked was when clients were on the phone with me sobbing because they never felt adequate. And so then that's when I started to, and full disclosure here, I used some language when I first started my fitness business, and it was triggering. It was trying to sell something at the beginning, and that's completely honest. But Now, when you realize that it's not about that, this is a lifelong thing, and this is emotional just as much as it is physical. I think, and that's just wellness in general. That's exercise, that's sleep, that's everything, right? So, I have apologized. I have apologized for using that language in the past, and I think that's important. That you know to realize that this is more than just it's such a big thing, right? And there is no program that is going to save your life. Like, I don't care what you think. If you think a 6-week fix, workout plan, diet plan, whatever, if you think that is going to fix you without addressing what's within, then that's where we need to really refocus. And I think that I've transitioned my clients to focus more on that, looking at, are you getting stronger? Are you sleeping better? How is your mood? And this is just talking fitness and exercise, but there's so much more, and there's people out like you out in the space right now, who are, coaching people in that way. And I think that that's so valuable right now. I want to circle back a little bit and talk about shame and how, I'm glad that you mentioned the social media too. And what I've been telling a lot of the people that I work with is, see if you can unfollow 5 people a day on social. Like, I'm not saying Instagram, you need to get off Instagram. I would never, you're a grown person. Go ahead and if you want to go on Instagram, go ahead. But if you find that you are having that, what did you say, 60 to 70% feel more unhappy? If you're getting that feeling, then it's time to say, I need to unfollow 5 people, whether it's a day, a week, whatever, because your mental health is so crucial.
Yeah, I agree. And something that I always say to my listeners or to my clients is, let's do a big diet, influencer purge, and anyone who you followed who's promoting keto or some quick fix or some skinny tea or whatever the BS is, and it's making you feel worse, or you feel like you give your power away every time you see their posts, it's time to unfollow. So whether it's 5 a day, or you unfollow 100 people in a day, and you donate all your diet cookbooks, and you delete all and unsubscribe from all the emails from these, people, because I think one of the biggest problems, or the biggest misalignments with all these influencers who just all of a sudden gain a bunch of followers, it doesn't mean they should gain credibility. Just because someone has 1 million followers, it does not mean that they know how to take care of themselves, that they're practicing what they preach behind the scenes, and that they're not just in it to, sell a bunch of products and make a bunch of money. They could be very authentic, and they could mean very well. And I know there are some that are truly that way, but I see far too many who come along, explode, and are promoting messages that is really like, oh, well, that person has 1 million followers, so I'm going to trust them, and I'm going to give them my money because, well, they must know what they're talking about if they have 1 million followers, when they could have no idea. It's like when a computer scientist decides all of a sudden they're a doctor and starts sharing information when they really shouldn't be. You're way out of your scope, right? It's like, I don't talk about things that I'm not very heavily familiar with, educated on, or have been through myself. I stay within my means. However, I find the problem is when someone's out of their power, this is kind of, so here's the thing with the shame, because this is so tied to that. Someone goes on a diet, or goes, does diet and exercise, whatever that is. They lose some weight. They go to a party. They eat something that they, quote unquote, weren't supposed to. And then they go, I messed it all up. So whatever, screw it. And then they fall back into binging, or falling off the wagon, or whatever you want to call it, overeating. And then they hop on the scale a few days later, and they're up 5 pounds, 10 pounds, whatever, the water retention, but they freak out. And then there comes the wave of shame, guilt, anger. They lose more hope within themselves. Their trust within themselves drops another 10 points. And then it's the shame and desperation that has them go on social media or Google fastest ways to lose weight. They click on the first few things that pop up. They read all the success stories and promises, and they look at all the body comparison photos, and they go, oh my God, this is the thing I must need. And they pull out their credit card, and they just impulsively from a feeling of shame and desperation, make a misaligned decision and buy that program and stay stuck in the hamster wheel. So that's where the shame is making the diet industry trillions of dollars, because they know how to market and they know how to sadly feed off of the desperate and the insecure.
And I think, oh my, like that right there. And it's hard, to be honest, it is hard to convince someone, not convince them, but like coach them to understand that, while 6 week cleanses and detoxes could be well intentioned, that's not that yo-yo. Like, I see it a
Yeah,
lot in the fitness industry where like the winter is the bulk and then the summer is the
I
shred, right?
know.
Why can't we just look at 365-day wellness instead of
Yeah.
being like, and I know there's science to that. If you want to get stronger, yes, you do need to consume more calories. I understand that, right? And there's a lot of males, I'm speaking a lot to the males right now, who go through that where it's almost like a binge and a purge, right? But if there is shame associated with that, and it's just like, you're never going to feel okay in your own body if you're
No.
just constantly following this roller coaster.
No, and no matter how much muscle you gain or how flat your stomach gets, you will not be happy, because nothing external can fulfill the internal void, and nothing external, whether it's the way you look, the kind of car you drive, how much money I have. Yeah, I'm all about nice things, but none of that fulfills me internally. It is about loving myself and finding the internal peace. And when I feel in my power, I feel unstoppable. And so dealing with the mindset and doing that deeper work gives you that. But, think of how much money people spend on all these quick fixes and external things, or like plastic surgery. Good God. Like, I don't want to judge anybody, but however, when someone has to recreate their whole external body, there's got to be internal hurt and emptiness going on, because why would you need to do all of that if you really loved your body and felt good about yourself? Yes, I think there's, exceptional things where maybe you get burnt or like, certain things, but we're seeing a whole new race of people who are completely fully altering themselves, and they don't even look human anymore. And I think, filters on social media are skewing and dysmorphing people's views of what they should look like. And that's scary. Like, I don't think, when a girl is 5 years old and she's going on a Snapchat filter and then she wants to look that way and she's getting that programming, like, that's scary. I don't know if do you have daughters? Like, can you imagine her getting to be 18 and thinking that she needs to look like this filter? It's not what we should be, exposing anybody in any generation to, because it's unhealthy. And so, yeah, I want to make a comment about the detox stuff, because this is really interesting.
Please bring it on.
So, this is where we can start to play with fire. When we don't know our current state of health, and you read about this, 6-week detox, 6-week cleanse, juice fast, taking certain herbs and supplements, whatever it is, we can end up innocently doing more harm than good sometimes when we just hop on these things, even though they say, oh, it's going to give you more energy and you're going to detox your liver and your bowel health is going to improve, blah, 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 whatever it is. But if you don't know your current state of health, which is like, what are your what's your hormone state? What's your digestive state? Is your liver even in a place where it can properly eliminate toxins? Is your urinary elimination system working properly? Is your lymphatic system working properly? Are you having daily bowel movements? Are you eliminating daily? Is that part of your detoxification working properly? Because say you're someone who's not going to the bathroom every day, your liver isn't working properly, but then you want to hop on this intensive cleanse, you could end up making yourself so sick. You could then mess up your hormones more. And that is not something that you want to go into, because then you're having a negative association that juice is bad for me because I only drank juice for this amount of time. And now, no, like that's no good for me. Or I must not be able to take those supplements because I took them and I got sick when it was too intensive. So here's an example. So say you have severe adrenal fatigue. So your cortisol is way too high. So some of the most common symptoms of that, cortisol is a stress hormone. I often see it gets way too high for people. You sleep 12 hours a night, but you don't feel rested. You're gaining weight, especially in the abdominal, brain fog, poor memory. Your mood is low. You have more cravings for salt and sugar. You don't feel like yourself. Afternoon energy lulls. So when this all is happening, and you're like, oh, I really want to lose weight, so I'm going to use the keto thing because I think keto is such a fad, except for maybe a small amount of population that has to use it for medical reasons. But it fuels unhealthy behaviors with food. It's fueling eating disorders. It's fueling binge eating, and it's fueling food fear. So I haven't seen anything good come out of it. So if you have severe adrenal fatigue and then you hop on a high protein, high fat diet, you're going to further negatively impact your adrenal glands, because high fat, high protein takes more energy to break down, and your body's already so depleted because your cortisol is so high and your body's so exhausted that now you have to expend more energy trying to break down all that food instead of also incorporating good quality carbohydrates, which you need to help balance adrenal fatigue. And so then you make your cortisol worse, and then that could connect to your thyroid, and you could push your thyroid underactive. For women, then your progesterone could drop, your estrogen could dominate. For men, your testosterone may drop. And now all of a sudden you're not building the muscle you want to build for men. And for women, you're exhausted and you're gaining weight in your abdominal and you're so frustrated. So here's an innocent example of someone who doesn't know what's going on within their body, but who reads something or sees someone promoting this and then goes, oh, that's what I need because it's promising, that I'm going to lose the weight or my cravings are going to go away. But it's damaging your hormones. It could damage your digestive system because you don't know your current inner state. One other just quick example of this is, and I'll stick with the cortisol. So maca is a herb that's really great for helping with high cortisol. However, if you don't know your other hormone picture, if you have high estrogen, maca boosts estrogen levels higher. So, and this actually happened to me before I got really into a deep understanding of hormones, is I read a book, the guy talked about maca, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to start taking that. So I took it every morning, and then I was like gaining weight, even though I wasn't binging anymore. And so I did some deep investigation and discovered not only is my cortisol high, but my estrogen is high. And then I started to read that if your estrogen is high, you should not consume maca. And I'm like, oh my God, I've been taking this herb to help with my cortisol, but here it is, and it's pushing my estrogen levels way up. So it's so innocent. We have this want to do good for ourselves, but we just blindly go on Google or read a book, which it's great to read books and it's great to, be your own advocate, but sometimes we really need to be educated by somebody or like really explore, okay, what's going on first? And is this even something that is in alignment for me? Because intensive detoxing, I find, often does more harm than good. And we need to go gentle because there's so many things that need to be in alignment for you to eliminate the toxins properly.
And I think that goes back to the social media aspect of things too.
Mm-hmm.
If you're following 27 different people in a similar space, you are getting so much conflicting information.
Yeah.
So one of the best pieces of advice that I heard years ago was, if you go through your podcast list and you are listening to 12 different podcasts at different times, you're going to get 12 different pieces of advice. So unsubscribe to 10 of them, listen to 2 trusted experts that you really, really want to believe in and so, work with them and follow that advice instead of getting misaligned information. Because I'll tell you a funny story. My mother-in-law, and I forgot the supplement that was recommended, but she was watching one of those doctor shows. And they said, oh yeah, a teaspoon of this could do that. And she was like, oh, okay, I'll try two teaspoons or whatever it was. I'm not sure the exact, but she got to her skin was crawling. She felt, and I forgot what the supplement was called, but it's, anyways. So we had to take her to Emerge because she didn't know the feeling and she didn't know what was going on. And it's just scary when you try to get, or when you're hearing all this different advice right now, and it's tough. 7-8 billion people in this world. It's tough because everybody is different, right? So to say there's a one size fits all program or results for people is totally incorrect.
Yeah, but that's why people have to start using their discernment and listening to and following information that feels in alignment for them, not based off of the person and how many followers they have or what guests they've had on the show. It's like, does this feel in alignment for me? And are these messages resonant for me? And if not, unfollow those and stick with those 2 or 3 that are. And the other thing is, just because someone has a major TV show or a celebrity has endorsed your product, it does not mean that is right for you. I think honestly, one of the biggest red flags is when a celebrity or someone with a big show is endorsing a product, because I know that there's a company paying that celebrity or person a lot of money to endorse that product so that they can make a lot of money. So I think avoid all that. So when you see Oprah endorsing Weight Watchers, huge red flag, right? In my opinion, I don't think that that's in alignment at all, but that's where we see a lot of these like programs and plans and diets and supplement protocols. It's just like that, again, is all external. If you really want to make the changes, you have to go inside and you have to use your discernment. Does this feel like it's in alignment for me? And that's what we have not been taught. We've been taught to rely on external sources, right? Rather than, how does this feel for me? Does this feel right for me? And if I'm not getting everything I need, maybe I need two different people's help, right? That is, we really need to become our own advocates.
Yeah, I think that's really important. So, I appreciate your time today, but I did want to ask you one final question before I let you go and get some time back in your day. But I really want to know, let's get some tangible advice for people out there, just speaking on a general basis. But, if somebody thinks or somebody realizes that maybe they do have something to do with emotional eating, I guess, where would you point them? What are some tangible things that somebody can do right off the hop, right now, from their own home during COVID, mind you, when the stress is just through the roof and everything like that? Like, I'm curious, what are some tangible tips that you could give somebody?
Well, I think as I was talking about earlier, the question around the physical versus emotional hunger and starting to explore, what's stressing you out and what keeps pushing you to food. Make a list of foods that you feel triggered to. Is it chocolate? Is it ice cream? Is it sugar? Is it salty foods? And be mindful of how much of that you're bringing into the house, because you may need a period of time where you have less of that and you look at more alternative ingredients with more whole foods recipes. So it's not about deprivation, but it's about looking at more whole foods ingredients that are not going to trigger these intensive cravings and a loss of control. I think we need to shut off social media and spend less time on technology and spend more time tuning into our bodies. So create a self-care routine. Start with 15 to 20 minutes a day if you can, give yourself more, but get into some form of self-care or multiple kinds of self-care that you like. Experiment with different things like journaling or meditation, deep breathing, get out into nature, go for a walk, listen to a podcast, find some podcasts that you feel uplifted, by the time you're done listening to them. Do the unfollowing on social media. If you're really in a place where you're feeling like, I just am so overwhelmed and I have no idea where to start, then I would encourage you to get support of some kind in whatever resonates to you, whether you already have someone in mind that you just need to send an email to, or you're like, maybe, from listening to a podcast, you connect with that person. I know that's how a lot of women end up reaching out to me, is through my podcast, because they resonate with me. They know I understand where they're at, and it makes them feel safe enough to reach out and start exploring that support. So with whoever and whatever it's resonant with, I think that it's so important that you don't have to do it alone. Like, yes, you can start at home and, introduce some of these things, but honestly, it's such a deep, it's so complex that if this is something you've been struggling with for a long time, I would encourage you to get help with it, because if it hasn't changed in 10, 20, 30 years, how is just trying another diet or trying to do better on your own going to get you where you want to go? But I mean that in an empowering way, because I think we have to do it on our own. And if I get help, I'm weak. And it couldn't be further from the truth, because getting the support could be the thing that helps give you the freedom you're seeking for the rest of your life.
Because that's the thing, is it is lifelong. It's not back to a 6-month weight loss challenge. It's not, and that's, this is for life. Like I calculated it. It's like Canadians will live on average about 82 years, right? Which is about 30,000 days, right? So to think that 30 days is going to make a difference and that you're going to be happier at the end, like this is all within. This is all, and I completely get that. What about like support groups and like Facebook groups or anything like that? Do you offer anything like that?
So I have a private Facebook group called Women Choosing Body Freedom. So that's a place where like-minded women can come and share their experiences. And I go in and do lives and share information. So that's something that I offer. And then I do encourage people, if anything that I'm sharing is resonant, to listen to my podcast called the No Sugarcoating Podcast, because I have over 240 episodes where I go deep into the mindset. I go deep into the hormone and digestive pieces, the cravings, the blood sugar, the weight blocks, the self-talk, the diet conditioning, the fads, all this kind of stuff, where I really go through all this and share my own personal experiences. So that's another great resource that if you're enjoying this conversation, you probably really like the podcast. And then I do have an emotional eating quiz on my website at amberprove.ca. So if people are curious if they're struggling, you can go through the questions and see what pops up. I talk more about body freedom there. And if it's resonant for you, like, to me, it's if someone connects with me, great. If you connect with someone else, I just want people to get the help, regardless of who it's from or what resources it's from. But I do offer a 30-minute body freedom call if anyone wants to connect and just talk about it. Like, maybe it's the first time you're just finally ready to open up. I'm here to hold that space and listen and give you some insight and explore what could be possible for you if you tried a different approach. So those are some things I can suggest for people. And of course, on social media, I share, different posts and information and just things to help plant seeds. What would it be like if you could be in a different headspace? And I think it's so important to start thinking differently, behaving differently.
Love that. Love that, Amber. And you know what? It's so great to see your journey, and thank you for making time today.
My pleasure.
Because you and I were really good friends back in college. So it's so great to see that you have taken those skills and now you are just helping people. And I think that you come from a genuine place, you come from a place of experience, and you are just, I believe in you. So thank you so much for taking the time today. And, to be honest, like, I'm still working on this myself. I'm working on the language and I'm working on empowering people. And it's being educated by people like you to understand that, it's not just calories in, calories out. It's not just sets and reps. I mean, this is something that you need to focus on. It's a practice. It's something that you need to, get help or stay accountable to someone. And I think that is amazing. So thank you so much. Is there anything else that you wanted to add before we say goodbye?
Well, thank you for having me. And I'm so happy to hear that you're, on this journey too, and you're doing the inner work. It just goes to show you that we're all human. We're all at a different pace in our journey, and that's okay. You can always get started, and, failure, embrace the failure, because that's my last piece of advice. People are afraid to fail. Failure is a powerful teacher. If you can learn from the failure and be open to it, you will be able to move forward and gain the success. It's when people allow the fear of failure to block them from doing anything that you stay stuck. So be open to embracing failure. You're not alone. You can change it. Anyone is worthy to have and achieve, this inner love and peace. So just be open to taking a different approach.
Beauty. Thank you, Amber.
Thank you.
I'm gonna stop the recording, but just hang out for 30 seconds, okay?
Mm-hmm.